The morning sun streams through the spotless windows of Pete's Diner, casting warm rays across the checkered floor tiles that have witnessed 30 years of small-town Texas history. Staff Sergeant Marcus Johnson sits in the corner booth, his Army Ranger's uniform pristine despite the 14-hour drive from Fort Benning. The Distinguished Service Cross on his chest catches the light occasionally, drawing subtle glances from other patrons who recognize the weight of such an honor. The aroma of fresh coffee mingles with the sweet scent of Marie's famous apple pie, a combination that had filled Marcus' dreams during his 15-month deployment in Afghanistan. Each bite of his breakfast tastes like a homecoming. The eggs cooked exactly the way his mother taught Pete decades ago, the hash browns crispy on the outside and tender within, just as he remembers. Sarah Martinez, now head waitress at Pete's, approaches with a fresh pot of coffee. Her eyes sparkle with recognition as she refills his cup. They had shared more than just chemistry notes in high school. They'd been close friends until duty called him away. On the house, Marcus, she says warmly, her voice carrying the same gentle twang he remembers. It's the least we can do. The diner buzzes with the usual morning crowd. Old Mr. Henderson sits at the counter, solving his daily crossword puzzle between sips of black coffee. The Carson twins, now sporting gray hair but still identical as ever, occupy their usual spot by the window. A few truckers, drawn by Pete's reputation for the best breakfast this side of Dallas, fill out the remaining booths. It's a slice of America that Marcus had carried in his heart through every mission, every firefight, every long night in distant lands. Through the reflection in the chrome napkin holder, Marcus observes 3 new faces at the counter, oil workers, he guesses, based on their weathered hands and heavy work boots. The town has grown since he left, with the new drilling operation bringing fresh faces and opportunities. His father's letters had kept him informed of the changes, but seeing them firsthand feels different. As he cuts into his second piece of toast, his ranger training subtly kicks in, a habit born from countless operations. His eyes scan the exits. 2, plus the kitchen, note potential cover, the solid oak counter, the booth partitions, and track movement patterns, the steady flow of waitresses, the predictable paths of regular customers. It's not that he expects trouble, it's just who he is now. The Distinguished Service Cross on his chest tells only part of his story. The mission that earned him this honor remains classified, but the skills he gained, the leadership he demonstrated, and the lives he saved are carried in his steady hands and alert eyes. 3 of his team members are alive today because of decisions he made in mere seconds, under fire in the dark of night. A young boy, no more than 7, stares at him from the adjacent booth. Marcus offers a warm smile, remembering himself at that age, watching returning soldiers with the same wide-eyed wonder. The boy's mother whispers something about respect, and the child responds with a shy but serious attempt at a salute. Marcus returns it properly, maintaining the solemn moment the boy clearly craves. The morning peace feels like a gentle blessing, a reminder of why he serves. The flag outside Pete's Diner hangs still in the windless morning, its reflection visible in his coffee. Marcus checks his watch. 8:47 a.m. He has the whole day ahead of him, the first real day of leave in over a year. His plan is simple: breakfast at Pete's, a visit to his parents' house, and maybe a long walk through the neighborhood where he grew up. But as the sound of approaching motorcycles begins to rumble in the distance, Marcus's training whispers that plans have a way of changing. The vibrations of heavy engines grow stronger, and Sarah's expression shifts ever so slightly as she looks toward the parking lot. The peaceful morning at Pete's Diner is about to become anything but ordinary. 3 customized Harley-Davidson motorcycles roll into Pete's parking lot, their engines deliberately thunderous against the quiet morning air. Chrome pipes gleam in the Texas sun, and leather tassels dance in the artificial wind of their arrival. The lead bike, a midnight black Road King with flame detailing along its fuel tank, pulls into a spot directly in front of the diner's main window. 2 more bikes, equally imposing, flank it like loyal soldiers. Rex the Hammer Davidson cuts an intimidating figure as he dismounts his bike. Standing 6'4" with shoulders like a bulldozer, His leather vest strains against his frame. The vest displays various patches, some earned, others merely claimed. His graying beard, meticulously maintained, reaches halfway down his chest, and a bandana wraps around his head, failing to completely contain his wild mane of pepper-gray hair. His companions, Mike Switchblade Carter and Danny the Ghost White, followed his lead. Mike sports a lean, wiry build that belies his reputation for quick violence, while Danny's massive bulk makes even Rex look modest by comparison. Their boots crunch against the gravel as they approach the diner's entrance, a sound that makes Sarah instinctively step back from the window. The glass door swings open with enough force to rattle the bell above it. The familiar breakfast chatter dies immediately, replaced by the heavy thud of motorcycle boots against linoleum. Regular customers suddenly become intensely interested in their coffee cups or phones. Old Mr. Henderson abandons his crossword puzzle mid-clue, and the Carson twins exchange knowing glances, having seen this pattern before. Rex scans the diner like a man conducting an inventory of his own property. His eyes move from table to table until they lock onto Marcus's corner booth. Something flashes across his weathered face. Irritation, perhaps, or the anticipation of entertainment. He nudges Mike with an elbow and jerks his chin toward Marcus, a silent command that his companion immediately understands. Well, Rex's voice carries across the diner, deep and gravelly from years of smoking. Looks like someone's sitting in our spot. Each word is carefully chosen and projected, a performance for his audience as much as a challenge to Marcus. The bikers begin their approach, spreading out slightly as they walk, an unconscious formation that any combat veteran would recognize as amateur tactical positioning. Sarah's hand trembles slightly as she sets down her coffee pot, her eyes darting between Marcus and the approaching bikers. She reaches for the phone behind the counter, her movements subtle but purposeful. The cook, Pete Jr., steps out from the kitchen, dish towel still in his hands, his expression caught between concern and resignation. The clicking of boots against the floor creates a rhythm that sounds almost like a countdown. Rex's shadow gradually extends across Marcus' table, blotting out the morning sun that had been warming his coffee. The other customers begin to gather their belongings quietly, some leaving cash on their tables, preparing for what they assume will be an inevitable confrontation. Mike and Danny take up positions that would be flanking if they were actually trained, their stances broadcasting their intentions to anyone with real combat experience. Their leather creaks as they move, and the chains on their belts jingle softly, creating an almost musical accompaniment to the tension building in the air. Through all of this, Marcus continues to eat his breakfast with measured calm. His movements remain smooth and unhurried as he cuts another piece of his remaining toast. In the chrome of the napkin holder, he tracks their positions without having to look up, his ranger's training transforming the reflection into a tactical display of everything happening behind him. Rex plants both palms on Marcus' table, his large rings clanking against the formica surface. The entire diner seems to hold its breath, waiting to see how the uniformed soldier will respond to this blatant challenge. The morning sun continues to stream through the windows, creating long shadows that stretch across the checkered floor like lines being drawn in the sand. The tension in Pete's diner thickens like morning fog on a Texas highway. Sarah's hand hovers over the landline phone behind the counter, her finger tracing the raised number 9, then 1, ready to dial if needed. Her other hand clutches her order pad so tightly her knuckles have gone white. She remembers the Marcus she knew from high school, the gentle giant who tutored freshmen in mathematics, the team captain who always had time for everyone. But the man sitting calmly in that corner booth now carries himself differently, with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from facing real danger. Through the diner's large windows, the morning sun catches the metals on Marcus's uniform, creating tiny constellations of light that dance across the ceiling. His breathing remains steady, measured, the same controlled rhythm he used during night operations in distant mountains. He takes another sip of coffee, the cup making a deliberate soft click as he sets it back on its saucer. Rex's massive hands remain planted on the table, his silver rings leaving slight indentations in the formica surface. Behind him, Mike shifts his weight from foot to foot, his fingers drumming an irregular beat against his leather-clad thigh. Danny's bulk casts a shadow that seems to swallow half the booth, his breathing already heavy from the short walk across the diner. The other customers have created a subtle vacuum around the scene, like planets adjusting their orbits around a growing star. The Carson twins have stopped pretending to eat their breakfast, their forks suspended halfway to their mouths. Old Mr. Henderson's crossword puzzle lies forgotten, though his pen still hovers above 6 across, as if maintaining the illusion of normalcy. You know, Rex's voice breaks the silence, carrying the kind of false friendliness that often precedes trouble. This booth has been our spot for 5 years now. Every Tuesday and Friday morning, like clockwork. He drums his fingers on the table, the sound echoing in the unnaturally quiet diner. Ain't that right, Sarah? Sarah starts slightly at being drawn into the confrontation. Rex, please, she begins, her voice steady despite her obvious concern. There are plenty of other. Wasn't asking for alternatives, sweetheart. Rex cuts her off, his eyes never leaving Marcus. The wooden booth creaks as Danny shifts his weight, attempting to look more intimidating. An unnecessary effort given his size. Mike has worked his way around to the opposite side, completing their amateur attempt at surrounding the soldier. Marcus slowly places his napkin beside his plate, the movement smooth and deliberate. His ranger's training has kicked into full gear, his mind automatically calculating distances, angles, and potential scenarios. The booth's layout offers 3 possible exit routes. The table itself could serve as an effective barrier if needed, and the silverware. He pushes that thought aside, knowing there are better solutions than escalation. Through the window's reflection, he notices Pete Jr. in his white cook's apron, positioning himself near the kitchen door with a firm grip on his trusted cast iron skillet. The cook's loyalty is appreciated but unnecessary. Marcus has handled far more dangerous situations with far less favorable odds. The air conditioning hums overhead, its steady drone a counterpoint to the growing tension. A coffee cup clinks nervously against its saucer somewhere in the background. The morning sun continues its slow climb, shifting the shadows across the checkered floor like pieces on a chessboard. Each minute feels stretched, elastic, ready to either snap back to normalcy or break into chaos. Marcus finally looks up, meeting Rex's stare directly for the first time. His eyes, calm but alert, carry the weight of experience that no bar fight or street brawl could match. He sees Rex's confident expression flicker for just a moment, the instinctive recognition of a predator realizing it might have stumbled upon something far more dangerous than anticipated. The diner holds its collective breath, waiting to see which way this powder keg will ignite. Outside, a lone crow lands on one of the motorcycles, its caw cutting through the silence like a warning shot across a battlefield. Rex straightens up, towering over the booth like a storm cloud about to break. His confident smirk falters slightly as Marcus meets his gaze with unwavering calm. The morning light streaming through the diner's windows catches the distinguished service cross on Marcus's chest, a silent testament to courage under far worse circumstances than this. You might be wearing that fancy uniform, Rex declares, his voice carrying across the silent diner, but this ain't your territory, soldier boy. He looks around at his companions, seeking their supportive grins. Mike obliges with a snicker, while Danny's face remains an impassive mask, perhaps sensing something his leader doesn't. Marcus takes another deliberate sip of his coffee, the movement smooth and controlled. His mind flashes briefly to a midnight operation in Kandahar, where patience and precision meant the difference between life and death. This situation, while different, requires the same steady hand. Sir, Marcus finally speaks, his voice carrying the quiet authority of command. I appreciate that you have a regular spot here. He places his cup down with a gentle clink. But I've been coming to Pete since before I could see over this table. Ms. Rose Carson over there used to sneak me extra bacon when I was 10. He nods respectfully toward the twins, who beam despite the tension. Rex's face darkens at being addressed so calmly. Look here, he growls, leaning forward until his shadow completely covers Marcus' breakfast plate. Maybe you don't understand how things work here anymore. This town's change while you've been playing soldier in the sandbox. A subtle shift occurs in Marcus's posture, nothing aggressive, but his spine straightens almost imperceptibly. The other customers notice it, even if Rex doesn't. Sarah's hand tightens on the phone, while Pete Jr. edges closer to the counter, his trusted skillet still at the ready. 3 tours in Afghanistan. Marcus responds evenly. 2 in Iraq, 15 months away from home this last time. His words carry no challenge, just simple facts. Each morning over there, I thought about coming back to this diner, sitting in this booth, having Sarah pour me coffee just like her mother used to. He gestures around the diner with an open palm. Every person in this room has family members I've served alongside. Mr. Henderson's son was my lieutenant in Fallujah. Pete Jr.'s cousin was my medic in Kandahar. His voice remains measured, educational rather than confrontational. I spent years defending everyone's right to make their own choices, including yours. Rex's face flushes red, his embarrassment masked by growing anger. Mike's hand strays toward his belt, but a sharp look from Marcus, the kind that comes from spotting hidden threats in dark alleys, freezes him in place. You've got about 10 seconds, Rex snarls, to get up and walk out that door with some dignity intact. The threat hangs in the air like smoke, but somehow seems to dissipate against Marcus's calm demeanor. Marcus slowly folds his napkin, placing it beside his half-finished breakfast. Sir, I respect your right to make poor decisions. He keeps his hands visible on the table, a habit born from de-escalating tense situations with local warlords. But I strongly suggest you reconsider your current one. The diner seems to hold its breath. Outside, the Texas sun continues its climb, casting long shadows through the windows that stretch across the checkered floor like lines being drawn in sand. A coffee pot burbles in its maker, the homey sound incongruous with the thickness of tension in the air. Rex's knuckles whiten as his hands clench into fists, his face a storm cloud of wounded pride and anger. The moment balances on a knife's edge, waiting for someone to make the first move that will send everything tumbling into either resolution or chaos. The morning sun catches a bead of sweat as it rolls down Rex's temple. His face has turned a dangerous shade of red, embarrassment, and anger mixing into a volatile cocktail. The diner's air conditioning hums quietly overhead, but the temperature around the corner booth seems to rise with each passing second. Marcus rises smoothly to his full height, the movement fluid and controlled like water flowing uphill. At 6'2", he stands eye to eye with Rex, his physical presence transforming from seated soldier to standing warrior. His uniform, pressed and precise, creates a stark contrast to Rex's weathered leather vest. Sarah watches the scene unfold from behind the counter, her hand still hovering near the phone. She remembers Marcus from their high school track team, how he could sprint 100 meters faster than anyone else, but always slowed down at the finish line to help fallen runners. Now she sees a different kind of strength in his stance, the kind forged in places where finishing last often meant not finishing at all. Mike and Danny adjust their positions, attempting to maintain their flanking formation. Danny's bulk forces a young couple to scoot their chairs closer to their table, coffee cups rattling nervously on their saucers. Mike's hand keeps straying toward his belt, a tell that Marcus's trained eye catches and catalogs. Last chance, soldier boy. Rex growls, his voice carrying the hint of uncertainty that comes from facing someone who isn't following the usual script of intimidation. His right foot slides back slightly, setting up for a telegraph haymaker that Marcus spots as easily as he once spotted insurgent movements in moonlit mountains. The diner's regular customers have become an unwilling audience to this brewing storm. The Carson twins clutch each other's hands under their table, while old Mr. Henderson has abandoned any pretense of working on his crossword puzzle. Pete Jr. stands ready with his cast iron skillet, though the look in Marcus's eyes suggests such backup won't be necessary. Marcus keeps his hands relaxed at his sides, his posture deceptively casual yet perfectly balanced. His ranger training has shifted his perception. The diner becomes a tactical space, distances and angles calculating automatically in his mind. The table's edge, the booth's cushion, the distance to the wall, all become variables in equations of movement and counter-movement. 6 years of hand-to-hand combat training, Marcus thinks to himself, not in pride, but as tactical assessment. 4 different martial arts, 217 close-quarter combat situations. His breath remains steady, measured, the same rhythm that kept him alive during midnight raids and dawn patrols. Rex's face twitches as he reads something in Marcus's eyes, something that speaks of experience far beyond bar fights and parking lot brawls. A small voice of self-preservation whispers in his ear, but pride and an audience make it easy to ignore. His weight shifts forward, knuckles whitening as his hands clench into fists. The morning light streaming through the windows casts long shadows across the checkered floor, like nature itself is drawing lines that shouldn't be crossed. A coffee cup clinks somewhere in the background, the sound sharp against the tense silence. Outside, the Texas sun continues its climb, indifferent to the drama unfolding beneath it. Marcus's voice cuts through the tension, quiet but clear. "Sir, the next move you make will have consequences." It's not a threat, but a statement of fact, delivered with the same certainty he once used to brief his rangers before critical missions. "I prefer we both walk away from this with our dignity intact." The moment stretches like a rubber band pulled too tight, waiting to either snap back to normalcy or break into chaos. The entire diner seems to hold its breath, watching these two men stand on the precipice of a decision that will change everyone's morning, and perhaps much more. Time seems to slow as Rex launches his first punch, a telegraphed right hook that Marcus reads like a billboard. The soldier's training takes over, muscle memory built from countless hours of combat drills and real-world experience flowing into action. He shifts his weight slightly, letting the punch whistle past his ear close enough to feel the breeze. Marcus moves like flowing water, efficient and precise. His left hand deflects Rex's extended arm while his right foot pivots, using Rex's own momentum to guide the larger man off balance. The biker's eyes widen in surprise as he stumbles forward, his fist meeting nothing but air where Marcus's head had been a split second before. Sarah gasps from behind the counter as Mike lunges forward, reaching for Marcus's collar. But before his fingers can grasp the crisp uniform, Marcus executes a textbook arm control technique. His hands move in a blur, redirecting Mike's reaching arm into an escort hold that leaves the wiry biker wincing and up on his toes. Danny, despite his bulk, moves with surprising speed for his size. He charges forward like a freight train, intent on using his massive frame to overwhelm Marcus. The Ranger's veteran, however, simply steps aside at the last moment, helping Danny's momentum carry him straight into the empty booth with a cushioned thud. The entire sequence takes less than 5 seconds, but to Marcus, it unfolds like a detailed military operation. His mind catalogs every movement, every position, every potential threat and response. The training that kept him and his team alive through countless missions now serves to protect everyone in the diner without causing serious harm. Rex recovers his balance and spins around, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. He launches another attack, this time a wild combination of punches that Marcus slips and weaves through with almost casual grace. The soldier's footwork, honed through years of close-quarters combat training, keeps him perpetually half a step ahead of each swing. "Stay down, sir," Marcus says calmly as he guides Rex to the floor with a controlled wrist lock, his voice carrying the same steady authority he used to command Rangers in the field. The hold is secure but measured, designed to control rather than damage. No one needs to get hurt here. Mike attempts to break free from his uncomfortable position, but Marcus adjusts his grip slightly, causing the biker to freeze as he realizes any movement only makes his situation more precarious. Danny, having extracted himself from the booth, takes one look at his companion's positions and wisely decides to remain still. The other customers watch in amazement as Marcus maintains control of all 3 men with practiced ease. His movements are precise, almost elegant, like a choreographed dance, where he knows all the steps and his partners are stumbling through their first lesson. Not a single coffee cup has been knocked over, not a single chair overturned. Pete Jr. slowly lowers his cast iron skillet, recognizing it won't be needed. The morning sun continues to stream through the windows, now highlighting the tableau of the highly trained soldier maintaining perfect composure while restraining three men nearly effortlessly. The scene looks almost peaceful, despite the circumstances that led to it. The police are on their way, Sarah announces from behind the counter, her voice steady now that the situation is clearly under control. The Carson twins break into spontaneous applause, quickly joined by other customers who recognize they've witnessed something extraordinary, not just a fight, but a demonstration of skill and restraint. Marcus maintains his holds with the patience of a man who has waited out longer storms in more dangerous places. His breathing remains calm and measured, his uniform still crisp despite the brief flurry of activity. In the distance, the first sounds of police sirens begin to echo off the buildings of the small Texas town. Red and blue lights flash across Pete's Diner's windows as two patrol cars pull into the parking lot. Sheriff James Cooper steps out of the lead vehicle, his experienced eyes taking in the scene through the large windows. His deputy, Maria Rodriguez, flanks him as they approach the entrance, their movements practiced and professional. Inside, Marcus has already transitioned the three bikers into seated positions at separate tables. Rex nurses his wounded pride more than any physical injury, while Mike and Danny sit quietly, the fight completely drained from their postures. The soldier stands at ease nearby, his uniform still somehow pristine despite the recent activity. Staff Sergeant Johnson, Sheriff Cooper calls out as he enters, immediately recognizing the soldier. His voice carries the warmth of recognition. They had served in different units during Desert Storm, and the sheriff had followed Marcus's career through his proud parents. Mind telling me what we have here? Sarah steps forward, tablet in hand. I have the security footage ready, Sheriff. She taps the screen a few times, bringing up the crystal clear video. The cameras caught everything, including when they first came in. The modern security system had been Pete Jr.'s investment after a string of late-night incidents, and now it was proving its worth. Deputy Rodriguez begins taking statements from the other customers. The Carson twins eagerly recount the event, their synchronized storytelling bringing a touch of unintentional humor to the serious situation. Old Mr. Henderson offers his own detailed account, his crossword puzzle forgotten, but his observational skills sharp as ever. Outstanding restraint, Sergeant, Sheriff Cooper comments as he reviews the footage on Sarah's tablet. His trained eye recognizes the professional handling of the situation. No excessive force, no unnecessary movements, just clean, efficient control. Textbook handling of civilian engagement. Marcus stands respectfully as the sheriff speaks, his posture reflecting years of military discipline. Thank you, sir. Just wanted to make sure nobody got hurt. His voice remains level, showing no hint of satisfaction or triumph over the situation's outcome. Rex, still seated at his assigned table, watches the law enforcement officers move through the diner with groaning resignation. His earlier bravado has evaporated like morning dew under the Texas sun, replaced by the sobering reality of his poor decisions. Mike and Danny avoid making eye contact with anyone, their expressions suggesting they're already contemplating the consequences of their actions. Well, Sheriff Cooper addresses the three bikers. We've got multiple witnesses, clear security footage, and attempted assault on a decorated service member. He lets that sink in for a moment. I'd say you gentlemen have some explaining to do down at the station. Deputy Rodriguez begins the process of reading rights and preparing for transport. Her movements are efficient but not unkind. She's seen enough to know these men have already learned a valuable lesson today. The handcuffs click shut with quiet finality, more formality than a necessity given the biker's subdued demeanor. Sarah brings Marcus a fresh cup of coffee, her hands no longer shaking. The other customers begin to relax, conversation gradually returning to the diner like birds after a storm. Pete Jr. emerges from the kitchen with a fresh plate of breakfast for Marcus, refusing to let the morning's events spoil his favorite customer's homecoming meal. Your parents are going to love this story, Sheriff Cooper says to Marcus with a knowing smile. Your father still comes to our weekly coffee meetings, been talking about your return for months. He extends his hand to the soldier. Welcome home, son. Sorry, the welcoming committee wasn't more friendly. Outside, the Texas sun continues its journey across the sky, its warm light now falling on the 3 motorcycles that would soon need to be towed from Pete's parking lot. Inside, the diner slowly returns to its normal rhythm, though the morning's events have already begun weaving themselves into local legend. 3 months after the incident at Pete's diner, the morning sun streams through the same windows, illuminating a very different scene. Marcus sits at his usual corner booth, but today he's not alone. Across from him sits Rex, his leather vest replaced by a clean work shirt, his beard neatly trimmed, and his eyes carrying a new sense of purpose. The youth center program is really taking off, Rex says, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. Had 15 kids show up for yesterday's session. After his court-mandated community service ended, Rex had surprised everyone by volunteering to stay on at the local youth center, where Marcus had started teaching self-defense classes to at-risk teens. Sarah approaches their table with fresh coffee, smiling at the unlikely friendship that has blossomed from that tense morning. The diner itself has transformed. Photos of local service members now line one wall, creating a subtle reminder of the community's connection to its military members. Pete Jr. has dubbed it the Wall of Honor, with Marcus's photograph holding a central spot. Mike's interview went well, Rex continues, referring to his former companion, who, inspired by Marcus's example, had applied for a security training program. Danny's doing great too, got his commercial driver's license last week. The transformation of the 3 former troublemakers has become something of a local inspiration story. Marcus listens attentively, his quiet pride evident in his subtle smile. His twice-weekly self-defense classes have expanded to include lessons in discipline, respect, and community service. The program has drawn support from unexpected quarters. Even Sheriff Cooper regularly stops by to share his own law enforcement experiences with the youth. The Carson twins wave from their usual spot by the window as other morning regulars filter in. Old Mr. Henderson, now a regular volunteer at the youth center's reading program, works on his crossword puzzle while occasionally offering vocabulary suggestions to a young student seated nearby. The diner has become more than just a restaurant. It's evolved into a community hub. You note, Rex reflects, his voice carrying the weight of honest self-assessment. That morning could have gone very differently. He glances at the spot where he had stood 3 months ago, full of misplaced anger and pride. You taught me more in those few minutes than I'd learned in years of thinking I was tough. Marcus shakes his head modestly. We all have something to teach each other, he responds, his voice carrying the same calm authority it had that morning. The real victory isn't in winning fights, it's in preventing them. His words echo the philosophy he now shares with his students at the youth center. Outside, the rumble of motorcycles approaches, but now it brings smiles rather than tension. It's Saturday morning, which means the local Veterans Motorcycle Club, started by Marcus and surprisingly supported by Rex, is gathering for their weekly community service ride. They've become a familiar sight around town, helping with everything from home repairs for elderly residents to organizing food drives. The diner's door opens, bringing in Mike and Danny, along with several teenagers wearing proud smiles and new martial arts belts. They're followed by Sheriff Cooper and Deputy Rodriguez, all gathering for what has become a weekly tradition of breakfast and community planning. Sarah watches the scene from behind the counter, remembering the tension of that morning 3 months ago. The changes since then seem almost magical, the way one moment of controlled strength and dignity transformed not just 3 lives, but an entire community's perspective. Marcus's corner booth, once the flashpoint of conflict, has become known as the resolution table, where people now come to work out their differences through dialogue rather than confrontation. His example of strength through peace has rippled through the town like waves in a pond, touching lives far beyond that single morning encounter. The Texas sun continues its eternal journey across the sky, but now it shines on a community that has learned valuable lessons about judgment, redemption, and the true meaning of strength. In the end, what could have been just another story of conflict has become a testament to the power of dignity, respect, and the positive change that one person's example can inspire.